Have you ever finally recognized a pattern in your life only to then turn around and start criticizing yourself over it? You might realize something like, oh, I've been overgiving. And then your first thought is, oh, I should have known better. Maybe you recognize that you've been surviving. We talked about that last week. And you think, why am I still doing this? Why am I still like this? So many women, myself included, believe that being harder on themselves will finally help them change, become the person that they want to be. Like if I could just put myself under a microscope and figure out every single thing that's wrong with me, then, oh, maybe that will make it better. But what if the opposite is true? What if awareness is what creates change? And judgment actually creates resistance. Over the past 3 weeks, we've been talking about feeling off, internal contradiction, and the cost of us being strong and just surviving. And if you've been following along, you may have noticed things about yourself that you haven't really seen before. And maybe it starts to feel a little uncomfortable. Well, today I want to talk to you about what we do with that awareness because having awareness is it's something that is vital and crucial, and it's not so that we can turn on ourselves and put like I said, put ourselves under a microscope and then start scrutinizing everything that we do. Having awareness brings to our attention the things that we need to recognize and have grace to change. Self-criticism, it feels productive. It feels like we're doing something beneficial, but it rarely is. Many of us believe that criticism is a way to hold ourselves accountable. And so, just like having an accountability partner for whatever you want to do, whether it's a walking program or when I was in school, it was a study program. We think that having accountability is great and we're going to hold ourselves accountable and that's going to change everything and it's going to make everything all better. We think, well, if I'm just hard enough on myself, then I'll finally change. Except that's not usually what happens. What what usually happens? Let me tell you what I have noticed in other people and what I've noticed in myself. When I start to become ultra critical of myself, I fall into shame. And shame is the lowest vibration. It is the complete opposite of love. And then I fall into discouragement. I start this the shame just becomes like this cloud that overwhelms me and it hovers and it just like drags us downward. And then I start falling into perfectionism where I feel like, oh, if I could just, I hold myself to this standard that is, so critical. It says you have to do this and this and this and this and this. And if it's not like that, then hey, you didn't make the cut. And when that standard that I've set is so high that I can never possibly ever attain it, then I begin to feel overwhelmed. And then it leads to this almost emotional paralysis where then I feel stuck and I don't know what to do. Like and I'm talking about me personally because this is a pattern that I've noticed in myself, but I've helped hundreds of women and I've noticed that this is a pattern that most women, people in general, but women especially, we're really good at criticizing ourselves. We're really good at taking the blame and the responsibility for everything and everyone. And then we turn that inward and we say, well, I just wasn't enough, or well, if I could have just gotten it right and all that. Well, from a body and functional medicine perspective, what I have also noticed in these kind of women as we run tests on hormones and cortisol, the body can't heal well under chronic stress. As cortisol goes up, the need for sugar and for energy goes up. And prolonged cortisol elevation and prolonged blood sugar elevation leads to a state of inflammation in the body. And then that leads to weight loss resistance, let alone when we get to past menopause, like I am, that makes it even harder when estrogen is no longer helpful. And so it just creates this vicious cycle. The other thing that I've seen is that the parasympathetic nervous system, that state of our autonomic nervous system where we feel at rest and we can digest our food, we feel at peace and at ease, that's totally shut down. We are in fight or flight, the sympathetic tone. And that is when we feel like the lion is chasing us all the way through the jungle every single day, except we don't live in a jungle. We live in a world where our jungle and our stress is the kids and the work and the finances and maybe the fact that we can't lose weight and all the things. And we don't feel safe. And healing, true healing, requires safety. We have to feel safe. And I think that emotional work is the same way. Bringing healing to our thoughts and to our emotions, it works in much of the same way. And lasting change in our body, lasting change in our heart, lasting change in our emotions and the way we think, it is best cultivated in an environment of compassion. If we don't have compassion on ourselves, then it's really hard for us to feel safe, and it's really hard for us to make the changes that we so desire. We really do desire it, and that's why we get ourselves in these little conundrums, these little cycles where we just can't seem to get out of, because we really do want to change. We just are going about it in the wrong way. And so becoming aware means that we just observe. Awareness simply observes. Awareness doesn't accuse, it notices. It becomes curious. It's like I keep saying, we need to have this state of curiosity about ourselves where we're constantly, instead of scanning for all the things that we're doing wrong, instead of saying, okay, what's wrong with me? We ask instead, what am I noticing? Is there a pattern here? Is there something that, if this, then that, it always seems to work that way? What pattern am I noticing? And then on the other side of things, instead of saying, well, why can't I get it together? We might want to ask, well, okay, if I'm noticing this pattern, what is that pattern teaching me? What can I learn? What can I notice? What can I change so that when this leads to this, I can change it a little bit so that this leads to a different that. Curiosity, it creates space. It creates a space that allows understanding. It allows us to discover and to realize and to have those aha moments. And understanding often is a way that leads us into a path where we just change naturally and things happen. I don't want to say effortlessly, but they happen with much, much, much less resistance. There is always going to be a little bit of, pushback on ourselves as we learn to do this better, because our pattern, again, has been our MO, our modus operandum has been to, do the self-criticism and expect high things of ourselves and the whole thing that we just talked about. So there's going to be a little bit of resistance as we learn a new habit, but having that awareness and then having that grace with ourselves and that understanding, it's going to start to naturally lead to the change that we've been so, so longing for. And I mean, I keep saying this, but the amazing thing is we don't have to fix everything in one day. We don't even have to fix everything in 1 week. Although if we could wave a magic wand, we would want to do that. But we don't have to do that. We don't have to require that of ourselves. This may be the hardest lesson for high capacity women to understand, because Our natural tendency is to notice something and then go, right, okay, let's get to it. We need to turn this into a project and a list of things to get done so that this and this and this and this, and then, and off we run to the races. Now I need to fix it because awareness itself is work. But sometimes seeing things clearly is just enough for today. That's it. Just noticing without creating the project, without creating the to-do list that never seems to end, without reconstructing our whole entire life and our whole entire existence. Sometimes just noticing is what we need to do. Because growth, again, it's not an immediate action. Sometimes growth is simply sitting in what you have just learned, what you've just recognized. And God often works through process rather than pressure. I have a hard time recognizing that a God in my life where I feel like I'm under the thumbnail. What I recognize in the hand of God in my life is it's more like grace and patience and love and kindness and compassion. And that, sounds a little bit like the fruits of the Spirit to me. And so maybe the work that He wants to do in us comes through a process instead of pressure. And transformation usually happens gradually. It's like the caterpillar that's in the cocoon. He doesn't go into the cocoon one day and then the next day become a butterfly. It's a process. And even the peeling away of the cocoon is a process. And that's the same thing that happens in our body. Our body, short of a miracle, does not immediately, instantly heal overnight. It's a process of the changes that we make in the food and the movement and giving the nutrients and things like that that allow healing to occur in our body. So let me just go back and give you a few examples of what this self-criticism might look like. You might catch yourself saying, "Ha, I should have known better. Ah, why didn't I do that?" You might go, "Man, I'm so frustrated. Why am I not further along?" And then you set these impossible standards for yourself that you wouldn't expect anybody else to hold themselves to. But why do you hold yourself to those standards? You turn every insight that you make into a task, something that you can do. It's another project. And then, the big one, feeling guilty because you feel like you're stunted in your growth. Why am I not moving faster? Why am I not growing faster? Why are things not going faster? Because we want everything just like that. And then believing that awareness should immediately produce perfection. This is such a rich one here because many of us who criticize and hold ourselves to these standards, we feel like perfection has to be what we achieve and it has to be a daily accomplishment. And what it leads to is the frustration that creates us to become impatient because we aren't perfect, because we have not arrived. So I like to kind of turn that around and just kind of gently reframe it. What if, what if you spoke to yourself the way Jesus speaks to you? What if the still small voice of God in your life, what if your voice begins to sound like that to yourself? What if you start to speak to yourself with truth, but compassion? The Bible talks about speaking the truth in love. So many people get that part wrong, or they think love is being harsh and cruel. And that's just not the way it is. Jesus never spoke that way, except to the money changers in the market, but that's different. He mostly met his people, his disciples, and the people that he spoke to and ministered to with kindness and compassion. And he spoke truth and he spoke it in a way that they could receive it. And it created the sense of curiosity in the parables that he taught with. But he did everything that he did motivated with compassion and love because growth doesn't require shame. And it doesn't require condemnation. Awareness is an invitation. Curiosity is one of the kindest gifts that you can give to yourself. It's one of the kindest things that you can do. You don't have to become whole by criticizing yourself more. In fact, I beg the point that you probably can't grow and become more whole by criticizing yourself. It's actually probably the opposite of that. You become more whole by becoming more honest with yourself and learning to see yourself with honesty and generosity and compassion and love and grace and kindness. So here's some questions as you continue through your day and through your week. What has my inner dialogue sounded like lately? How have you been talking to yourself? How have I been talking to myself? Start to ask yourself these questions. Where have I been judging myself? Mm. And where could I replace criticism with curiosity? What pattern am I noticing without trying to fix it today? What if awareness itself is enough for this season? What might God be gently trying to show me? And what will my life change if I trusted the transformation that's already in place, but may take a little bit of time? So sit with those questions as you move through your day and through your week. And if this series has helped you to notice areas in your life where you might be out of alignment, I'd love to invite you to download my alignment check. It is a little questionnaire that I've designed to help you reflect with honesty and clarity and compassion, but not with judgment. And you'll find the link below. Let me close with this. You don't have to become a better judge of yourself. You simply need to become a better observer. Awareness is already doing an important work. So trust the process. Trust that the small shifts that are taking place in your heart really do create lasting transformation, which is what we desire, right? And remember, we don't have to fix everything today. We can't eat an elephant all in one bite. It happens one bite at a time, one day at a time, one step at a time. Sometimes the most courageous thing that we can do really is to simply notice and receive yourself with grace. Treat yourself the way you treat others. Treat yourself the way you treat others. Extend to yourself the same grace and the same love and the kindness and compassion that you do others. So this month we've been talking about awareness, but awareness is not the finish line. It's never the finish line. It's just the beginning. Before we move forward into next month's topic, I want to invite you to a special mid-year reflection next week. We'll slow down together and explore one more question. What's been draining you? I think you'll enjoy this because sometimes what depletes us is the first step toward creating a space for what gives us life. So I hope that this has blessed you this week. I hope that you've been able to take away something from it, and I will see you next week.